right, welcome to biology. We're here with day one of our second activity now with cells, and the focus then is the cell cycle. And so, as you see in the assignment title, you'll see cell cycle and then mitosis introduction. And so, um, part of the cell cycle we're going to see here are these different phases that these actually fall under interphase, but again, we'll go through that more in detail just a moment. And then it's mitosis. And so mitosis is the fancy biology word to describe cell division. And so we're now going to be talking about how cells divide. And the first day, right, this first part will be more of the overview. And then day two, we're going to be looking closer specifically at the stages of mitosis. Um, and hopefully we'll be able to identify those stages. So coming back here, the first thing I want you to do is to watch this video. The video will go through details of the different phases, show you different examples, and so I definitely want you to watch this. But again, with these videos, that's I don't want to watch it for you. Next, uh, I'm just going to talk about this, and while we're looking at this, I do have some descriptions here that are really the most important pieces of this. So when you're looking at this cell cycle, you can kind of think of it as the life cycle, if you will, of a cell. And so every single cell is going to go through this, and it starts here at the G1 phase. And that G1 is really going to be all about growth. So this is a brand new cell. It's got all the DNA that it needs. And so it's starting to pump out proteins to create itself. It's starting to then create these organelles. It's starting to increase its size. And so it's all about cell growth, really becoming a larger, more functional cell. And as you can see, this phase uh, is about 7 hours long. Okay, so for and let me rephrase this. There's an average, and so some can go a little faster, some can go shorter, and it does depend on what the cell is, like a skin cell or a nerve cell, and different things like that. Um, but generally speaking, every cell will have around the same timing. So it'll be growing for about 7 hours. Then it starts the S phase, and this is called the synthesis phase. And this is where DNA replication happens. So now it's really getting prepared uh, for the possibility of cellular division. And in order to do that, you have to have two sets of DNA. And so that DNA replication that we talked about last time and a few weeks ago as well starts to occur. The DNA polymerase starts going through and making the copies of the base pairs, and then it gets sealed back up, and now you have two copies, right? So DNA replication happens here, and then that takes about 8 hours. And we talked about last time, how long does it take to create a new copy of your DNA, right? And the answer that you had to research this one, if I remember right. The answer was about 1 hour, and the reason is because you have actually a lot of DNA polymerases making copies throughout your DNA strand, so it's able to do it quite quickly. But this process takes 8 hours, and that's because it's not just that replication process. But that is really the only thing that's truly important is that now you're going to have two copies of your DNA. So that's about an 8-hour process. Then it'll transition into this G2 phase, and this is really the final preparation for mitosis. So it's going to get a little bit larger. The cell is going to continue to grow and get just that much larger. And as it prepares for mitosis, um, you're going to start seeing things like mitochondria kind of dividing, and other kind of replications, if you will. But that's also just a little bit shorter as it prepares, because then you enter into mitosis and this cellular division. So mitosis, though, is actually pretty short and pretty fast. And so the main goal of mitosis then is that the cell divides into two what are called daughter cells, and they're going to get an equal set of chromosomes, and therefore they're really going to be identical. And I've stated here that mitosis, this M phase, is really divided into these subphases: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and then finally cytokinesis. And when we go into mitosis deeper, those are the phases we're going to talk about. And our goal is to be able to identify the characteristics of those phases, as well as then identify the image that would represent those. Um, and so in this video, we're going to, well, I should say, in this video, you're going to see these drawings that they've done, but he's going to actually show you as well what this looks like under a microscope. And um, for me personally, when I saw this for the first time under a microscope, and that cells are actually in these different phases, it was pretty mind blowing. Like, it's like, wow, it like actually looks like that. And so um, this video, I think, is super interesting because it does show you those real images of cells under the microscope, and that's how the biologists come up with these phases, and that's how they continue to study it further. So again, though, looking at this, okay, we have growth, that like initial growth. Think of a baby, toddler, almost into a teenager, and then DNA replication happens. This would be, I don't know, maybe your mid 20s. You're kind of adulthood, and then your final growth phase. If you're comparing it to a human life cycle, this would be like maybe retirement. Um, and so you're going through this part, and then you're preparing for the end, if you will, because you're going to create these two new offspring. Um, so again, just looking at this growth, S phase, and growth is all within interphase. So if I were re-looking at this, you could describe it as interphase and then cellular division, right? So those are those two main parts. But within that, we have these very unique phases that are occurring. So that's where these three come from. And then again here, through the cellular division, you see prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and mitosis. And you see that kind of mitosis kind of ends here, and then it's cytokinesis. And cytokinesis, the reason for that, mitosis is really okay. The cell is not creating copies, but it's separating your chromosomes, and it's really preparing the process of dividing. And the cytokinesis part is the final conclusion where the new cellular membrane closes off, and now you have two new cells. And so that's why cytokinesis is kind of labeled here as its own piece, because it's no more division, it is the division. All right. And then hopefully that kind of gives you enough. So if I were to kind of walk through these, what is the central role of interphase? That would be kind of, I'd probably have two parts to that answer. really, because growth is happening twice, and DNA replication. And you again that you see that 8 hours there is the largest part of interphase is that DNA replication. And so growth and replication is really key. Then in which phase does DNA replication occur? Okay, hopefully between the video and that chart up there, you can identify that. Why does the DNA need to replicate before cellular division? Okay, I'll let you think about that. Hypothesize. Okay, earlier in quarter three, we discussed briefly that during DNA replication, mistakes can happen. These mistakes are called mutations, right? So we talked briefly about that. We still haven't gone into a mutations activity. But what will happen if a mutation occurs in the S phase before the cell begins mitosis? Okay, so I'm hoping that we're trying to make connections to some of our previous learning, and then now we're hopefully making a more educated guess, a more educated hypothesis on what might happen. Then I want you to look up two questions. So when I say research, again, type it into Google. You can copy and paste this exact question if you want into Google. That's what I did, and you should hopefully get the same answer pretty quickly that I'm kind of thinking of. So just to put this into perspective was the idea of this. How many cells are in the human body? So we've talked about how there's lots of cells and cells are constantly dividing. That process is only about a day long, right? If you add those different times up, 7 hours plus 8 plus 5 plus 2 to 3, it's about 24 hours. So cells are constantly dividing and creating new cells. So how many cells are in the body? And of course, there's different types of cells, so to keep that in mind. And then how many cells divide in the human body every day? So if this process is happening all the time and it takes about a day, well, how many cells are actively dividing? So again, do your best. Not going to be a really right or wrong answer, but it's based on research. So hopefully you'll find the answer that I found. And next, looking at part two here. So we're going to be looking closer at mitosis. Again, watch this video; it'll be essential, and you might end up rewatching it because then the goal is simply that you can try to apply it. So looking at here, match the mitosis subphase with the appropriate description. I have the subphases here in order: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and then cytokinesis. And so you should be able to move these around. I kind of gave this one away, right? The actual splitting of a cell membrane uh, when the animal cells cinch apart. Okay, so I kind of already said that was. There we go. Maybe it's better if you click it. That was cytokinesis, right? And so that is the one that I would make sure is here. Okay, so again, you read the descriptions and you try and maybe click and match, and then see if you can get them all matched up. Then you're going to do the same thing with the pictures. So these pictures are the same as these descriptions. So if you can get these descriptions in the right order, hopefully you can get the images. But again, you'll see that the images are also here. They're not the exact same, but they're very similar and talking through it. So feel free to watch the video again. After you've done that, two more just questions to really focus our learning and make sure we get the main idea. What was the primary result of mitosis? Hopefully, by the end of this activity, that is pretty obvious, as we're seeing almost a complete example right here. And then, why must cells divide? Okay, and I made it multiple choice for us, but only one correct answer. Why must cells divide? So again, if you're at home in CDL, please feel free to do the whole activity at your own pace. And if you're coming for in-person hybrid, please pace yourself to do part one on Monday, and then part two on Tuesday, so that the pacing works better when you're in the classroom. Okay, and as always, let me know if you have any questions.